Hey everyone, it's Ellie Mae with Silhouette Secrets Plus, and today I have a When Things Go Wrong video. So this is one of my first tests with the Silhouette Auto Sheet Feeder, and I am selecting it to send my design. So I'm choosing my machine that I'm going to send the design to, and you have to select the machine with the sheet feeder connection. And I have links in the description below on more information on the sheet feeder. Now, here's one of the first places I went wrong. The biggest thing you need to do is test cut. So I use the setting that I normally use when I am working with cardstock on a cutting mat. And we're going to see here in a little bit that that is way too much when you are using the auto sheet feeder and the pop out. So I had some issues with that first, but I'm also going to point out a few other things here. So you want to make sure that you do test cut and your test cuts for your specific materials to make sure that when you're not using the cutting mat, that your settings are not going to be too deep to jam in the machine. So I set it up here. This is one of my first sends to, you can see the edges of the page curled when it went to go into the machine. So that was the first problem there. You really need it to be flat and as smooth as possible. If the corners bend at all, then it's not going to feed into the machine correctly. So you want to watch your materials as it's going in. So I tried again and I sent it, and you're going to see in the top right, that corner, even though it went, the top right corner was bent over, and that could be problematic. And then as it's cutting too deep. So I stopped the machine. I just turned it off. There is no pause currently when the Silhouette Auto Sheet Feeder is released. There's no pause that you can just touch in order to do that. The pause is overridden on the machine itself. So you have to turn it off to stop a job. So I came back, I reset the software again, I set it to go again, and to test it again. At this point, I had not realized that the cut settings were too deep and why it was jamming. You can see on that second sheet, it also curled the corner. So you really need to have your material and your media as flat as possible, or it could cause issues. It's going to jam up again here in just a second. As it goes through the machine, it cuts too deep. So I turn it off again, go back into the software, and I am going to cancel out the job here, and then I'm going to redo how I'm doing this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the Bluetooth connection for my Cameo 4 only. And what I am doing is I am going to take the sheet feeder off, which you'll see here in just a second, but I have selected only my Cameo 4 Bluetooth connection. I have success with the Bluetooth, and when you're using the auto sheet feeder, it's all connected by USB. So in order to bypass that, I turned the auto sheet feeder off and chose the Bluetooth connection. So now I am I turn the auto sheet feeder off. I pulled that material out of the machine because it was jammed in there. And then what I'm doing is I'm going to load this without the mat. So if you cannot get your auto sheet feeder to feed properly, you can still cut those pages. You would just do it without a cutting mat and load each one separately. And it'll show here in just a second again when it switches back over. But I am selecting that job and sending it through the machine. So you can save those pages if they do not cut out or you cannot get it to feed through the machine. So I had this happen a couple of times, not just because of my cut settings, but when I had materials that were too thick or materials that were too thin. I did have a sticker paper that was way too thin that just jammed up in the machine. And then I also had the Oracal printable vinyl with a laminate on top of it that was too thick to feed through the sheet feeder. So I ended up cutting both of those without the mat, one sheet at a time. So even though you have printed your pages, you would still be able to save those pages. And you're seeing me just switch back and forth as I'm testing this to go back to select the different options and to be able to send the job. So you can see in this portion of the video that it is performing that test cut after I have changed the settings back to cardstock plain, and it's doing the pop out cut. So I am still saving those pages, even though in the beginning it was user error, and then there was some issues with the pages not feeding properly. So I am still able to save those pages. And then I'm going to reconnect the sheet feeder. And for these last two, part of my problem, I had forgotten to put those feet down on the front when I'm using the Cameo machine so that it was perfectly level. So that was another part of user error in the beginning, because those feet weren't extended on the front of the sheet feeder. It didn't feed perfectly flat into the machine. So now I'm changing it down to 2 copies because I only have 2 pages left, and I'm going to choose the send option. And then we're going to send it back through, and once those feet are extended, it's perfectly flat. My cut settings are changed back to cardstock plain so it can perform that pop out cutting perfectly and not cut too deep. So if you cut too deep into the materials and it cuts completely through, those can jam up into the machine. It can also damage your cutting strip when you do that, because your blade is cutting completely through the material into the cutting strip on the machine. So you can see this pop out feature cut perfectly with the cardstock textured. I'm using Recollections cardstock. So any brand of cardstock you use, you just need to test it. Test it and see what the settings will work for your materials. And here is the finished project. I will post links in the description below to the successful video of doing all the print and cut with the sheet feeder. And here are a few more examples of all of the different stickers that I have been testing in sticker papers, adhesive cardstock, different brands of sticker papers, just regular cardstock. I've done a lot of testing and a lot of print and cut in the last couple weeks. Thanks for joining me. I hope you have a great day.